So we're gonna talk about your son.
Okay.
Leading up to what happened, how old were you when this happened?
I was in my 40s.
Okay.
And Terrence was 23.
So so how old were you when the album came out? Because I'm gonna give context to it.
When my album came out, I think I was, it was, I think I was like in my 30s.
Okay.
I think I might have been in my 30s.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking like 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm thinking about it too.
Yeah, because Terrence was born in 92. And then the album came out in 2009. And then 2011, it was nominated. Well, it was actually,
we made it in 2009. It came out in
2010.
Then you got the award.
And then I got the award in 2011.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then, through this whole entire time, were you still singing with the Christian Angels?
I was still singing. Wow. Still singing. Never stopped singing. I didn't want to stop.
Yeah.
I have to do what's that thing that is my refuge.
Absolutely.
That is my go-to.
Absolutely.
At all times.
Yes.
Remember I said how I grew up?
Yes.
We always have music. We always sing.
Yes.
Not only in good times, in sad
bad
times.
Yeah.
And that is the truth.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to the point where the most tragic thing could happen happens.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember where you were?
I remember where I was. I was in my car headed to work. I was in my car headed to work, and I was trying to turn out of the subdivision that I live in, and it was just so many cars, and I couldn't get out. And I didn't know why. I didn't know why it was so many cars. And as I proceeded on, then I saw like 30, 40 state highway patrolmen. Didn't know why. Had no idea why.
Did you go to work?
I went to work.
So you went past it?
I went past it. I saw a coroner's van. I called my cousin and I said, Terrence had come home last night. Maybe he went to the studio with Josh. Yeah. Maybe he went to the studio because he wasn't at the bus stop. And I got there a few minutes late and he wasn't there. Yeah. And I said, well, maybe he with my pastor's son, out late or somewhere with one of his friends because he always came home.
Yeah.
And I got there a few minutes late to pick him up. And so he tried to walk home. And so I just started a new job. That was my 3rd week on a new job. I knew no one at the job. Wow. So I was in training. So I got up to go to work. Got up to go to work the next morning. And that's when I saw the cars and all of the highway patrolmen because we live right outside of the city limits. So they're highway patrolmen instead of city cops because you live outside of city limits. And I was on the phone with my cousin. I said, well, I don't know where Terrence is, and I've been calling and he's not answering. And then I said, oh, girl, I said, look at all those highway patrolmen up there. I said, it's like a zillion of them. And I said, oh, there's a coroner's van. And then I said, girl, they putting somebody in there. And it was going this way, like toward home, as if where he would be walking. And I'm going this way to go to work. And I got to work, and because I didn't want to not be at work, but nothing was wrong.
Yeah.
Nothing was wrong. So, of course, I went on to work.
Went to work.
And I was just like, I'm on the phone with my cousin, and I'm like, girl, they putting a body bag in there.
Yeah.
And they shut the doors. And first they had the cars to stop on this side while they put the body in. And then when they got the body in and closed the doors to the coroner's van, they moved and let us go through. And when it got to my car, though, they let, I don't know how many cars go through. When it got to my car, they said, you need to turn around and go back the other way. I guess they decided to tape it off because it's like a crime scene. But I just wonder why when it got to my car, it was as if they knew me or something.
That's crazy.
Even though they didn't know me, but when I got to the front of the line, they didn't let me go. I had to make a U-turn, and all the cars behind me had to make a U-turn and turn
So
around.
that was like a very appropriate coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
I think about that now. Like, why when it get to my car of all cars? But I still went on to work, and I was still on the phone with my cousin, who's my best friend.
Yeah.
My grandmothers and sisters were best friends.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, we got to pray. I just can't believe it. I saw a body van, a
Yeah.
coroner's van. I never seen that before, except for on TV,
Yeah.
like watching shows that I don't watch anymore. And I get to work, and I call my sister, and I said, well, I can't reach Terrence. And she said, well, you need to call the police. I said, well, I don't want to call the police. I just can't. He's just not answering. She said, well, I'm going to call him. And if he doesn't answer, I'm going to call the police. So she never called me back. She sent me a text. And the text said, breaking news, an unidentified African-American male has been found dead in a hit and run. And that was it. And it just said breaking news. They have just a couple of lines. And it was horrible.
When you saw that, did you know?
I kind of thought, but I still was hopeful. I still was. When people, now I know what people mean when they get into a tragic situation and they say their life flashed before them, because that's literally what happens. When you're in a traumatic moment like that, so much flashed through your mind, so much. But one of the things that I kept saying in my mind was, it can't be my son. Like, that happens on TV. Like, it's just one of those moments that I can't really explain. But I kept thinking in my mind, and I kept praying. And of course, my supervisor at the time, she said, we're going to pray. We're going to pray. And they wanted to drive me home and I think I passed out.
Wow.
And once I got myself together, I said, I'm going to drive. I'm going to drive, because I didn't live but a couple of exits from my home.
Yeah.
And I talked to my sister-in-law, and she said, don't drive over there. Just wait. We'll come get you. And I said, no, just meet me back over there at the spot where the police were. And I got back over there, pulled back over there, and they had the crime tape up. And I got out, and I said, good morning, because it was still in the morning. It was about 10 o'clock that morning. I said, good morning. And they were like, good morning. And they were making markings in the road and doing what they do.
Yeah.
And I said, have you guys heard any news about anybody missing or anything? I was just like having a conversation, like in my mind, like literally not thinking the worst.
Yes.
And when I asked that question, they all stopped. And it's about 25 of them out there. They all stopped and start looking at me. And when the officer looked at me, he said, what is your son's name? I said, Terrence. He said, what is his last name? I said, Faison. And they just stared at me. And I passed out in the middle of the highway. There's a residential area here, residential area there. People were standing out there looking, because when something happened, people come outside, they look, and they were standing out there looking. And I remember the news helicopter flying over me, because by that time, I'm sure the news had already got involved, because my sister had already sent me that breaking news. And I passed out in the road, and I remember, all of that. And then they got me up and sat me in one of the SUVs, and they were all around me. They were standing all around me, just waiting on me to kind of get myself together. And I could see space in between them. And it was my oldest brother, and he was running. and he was running and he was screaming and he was running. He was running because he had to park. They had the tape up, so he had to park. They don't let you get close to a scene. So he was running, and he got me and put me in my car and drove my car to my house. And when I got to my house, I let the garage door up, and the news was riding up and down the street. There were people already standing out. They knew. The people in my neighborhood knew, and I never.
How did they know?
The news.
The news gave the name.
The news. They had it on the news by then. Because when you're out there and they're doing markings and stuff, they be out there a long time. And I was in the house and I was just in total shock. Just total. And then they got in touch with my family, the rest of my family, and everybody came over, and it was just horrible. It was a horrible day. It was a horrible day. And then they did confirm that it was my son. And even the officer that was looking at me really hard out there, he was in the front. And he said, I know that was your son because he looks just like you. He remembered that he looked just like me. I'll never forget that. Never, ever. And so we went through that. That was something I'm known for singing, by a lot of people, but that was a whole nother display.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're on display like that, the people in the neighborhood, the people from my son's job, the people from the bank where he worked, so many people that he knows. There, it was like, I can't explain it. Everybody knew. Everybody knew in the neighborhood. Everybody knew at the local grocery store. Everybody knew, like, when I went somewhere. Of course, they asked me, the detective said, we don't know who did this. It was a hit and run. We know, is there any way you could just make a statement so the person can possibly come forth? We can make a statement, but it's nothing like a mom or a dad. And I said, I can do it. I can do it. I felt like that was the least I could do. And sure enough, a few days later, they came back. The news, all the news channels was calling my phone. I didn't have my phone. My family had my phone.
Absolutely.
They were calling my phone, and they wanted me to talk. They wanted me to do an interview. They wanted me. And I was in shock. I'm like, this sounds like something on TV. And I got on TV. I told the detective that I could do it, but I asked my family to call my pastor, his wife, and I wanted my brothers to be there, my sister and Terrence's dad, and my mom, and just the people that's important to me to be there with me. And they were looking like, girl, how are you doing all this?
That's
like,
crazy.
They were like looking at me like, because they were just a mess. I was a mess too, but there was this strength inside of me, like, I gotta do this. And I went in. The news, it was 2 or 3 news stations. And they came and they were out in my yard. It was a lot of people out there. And I was in the house and we had prayer. And I asked my family, I will never forget this. I said, when we go out, can everybody just be strong and everybody just kind of, I want to get through it. And
look, y'all,
I don't want to break down and I want to get this because we need to know who did this. And sure enough, we got outside and they began to ask me questions and they said, what do you want to say to the person? And I said, if you are someone's daughter or a son, or if you just scared to come forward, you want to have a clear heart, because I have peace in my heart and I want you to have peace in your heart. And because I trust God. And that's when I came up with that declaration. I got t-shirts. I just trust God. I trust God. Like everything was I trust God. And I made the statement, and a few days before my son's musical wake, the night before his funeral, a few days before that, they told me they found the person that did it. People had called, people that I don't even know to this day, that I still haven't had a chance to meet. I still haven't had a chance to go thank the people that found them.
So it was people that found them, not even the.
It was a family that lived in the house, and their mailbox was down, because the detective said that probably when my son was hit, that his feet or something probably knocked their mailbox down. So their mailbox was down, and then there was my son in the ditch. Wow. And people lived in the house. A man and a woman, elderly, lived in the house, and they saw him when they went to the mailbox, and he was down in the ditch. So that night that I went to the bus stop and he wasn't there, I had my lights on bright. I was looking for him, walking maybe. And I say now, God is just so amazing that he didn't allow me to see him down in the ditch, because I wouldn't have been able to handle
Absolutely
all of that. And even in my peace and in my revelation from all of it, I know God was still protecting my mind and protecting me. And he knows what we can handle. He knows what we can take. And even this, if you would have asked me years ago, could I take something like this? I would say no. But God knows. Yes. He knows. He just knows. Yes. We can't pick and choose what our thing is gonna be.
Yeah.
You know, I thought fracturing my ankle was like horrible.
Yeah.
And I would have took that.
Yeah.
But we don't get to pick and choose what storm or what devastation or what trauma. It's not our choice. If it was our choice, we would be smooth sailing all the time.
Facts.
But we don't get to choose.
Yes.
God chooses.
Yes. So since then, I remember you telling me like about the book and different stuff. Mm-hmm. So like going through the process of grief, mm-hmm. that's one thing that I want to ask you about. What has that process been like?
Very hard. Very, very hard. But it's so crazy, Jamal. Everything in your life is to prepare you for something. So we assume that our gifts, like you can play, I can sing, is for something else. The preparation for our gifts, all of the rules that we got, all of the discipline, everything that we've gone through prior to our tragedy prepares us. Yes. Those are the tools that prepare us for whatever it is that God is going to take us through. Yes. That's the only way I know how to explain it. All the things that my grandmother especially and people put inside of me, my teachers, anything that I've done prepared me. I know that now I'm not saying that I was just ready for something to happen. I'm just saying, looking back, has prepared me to deal with this. I sang to people all of my life. I encourage people all of my life in my songs. Oh, you can make it. Woo, whatever you're going through, he'll bring you out. Oh, there's sunshine at the end of the rainbow. Yeah. But listen, you literally have to believe all of that when you get in that space. You have to pull all of that, what you've been telling somebody else, what you've been taught, what's been put inside of you. You have to use all of that to get through. Yeah. That. Yes. And that's how I've been able to continue to get through. Grief is something that doesn't just go away. Yeah. It is with us. We just learn to live with it. And then a few years after that, I just started going on my Facebook page, just encouraging people.
Yes.
Just always I found out that when I was doing that, it's almost like when I'm singing, when I'm
Yeah.
encouraging and I'm pouring out, I don't care what I'm going through. When I go sing, when I get on that stage and I'm in my zone, I could have just left whatever. But when I get in my zone, when I get into the music, when I get into what I'm doing, it is just like that place, my refuge, my good place. I'm encouraging people coming up by my CDs, people coming up wanting to take pictures, people coming up that just love me to death for no reason. They just love me.
Yes.
Will do anything for me. Kindness of people and all of that mixed together. And so I continue to sing. I continue to keep going. And it gave me another thrust of encouraging people and pushing people. And so people started inviting me out to speak about grief. Tell my story, tell my testimony, help us to get to where you are, where they thought I was,
Yeah.
you know. And I began to go and speak on different platforms, and even now people have me. I gotta call a young lady when I leave here today. She lost her baby after 6 days. Like, it's people reaching out to me and calling me like, how do you do it? And I begin to channel it around, because I thought about my son and his personality and his attitude. He don't
Yes.
like dragging around, and he
Yeah.
don't like complaining, and just and that pushed me. And I could hear him literally even now saying, "Mama, come on now," all that crying, like when he would graduate or get an award. I'm just mushy, and I'm just, so I can
Yeah.
still hear him now
Yeah.
pushing me like, "Mom, you got this. You can do this."
Yeah.
And I go out and I speak to different people. We had a man in the city that I live in, and he owns a restaurant, and his son was murdered. And we end up speaking on a panel together. On a panel, one of the first panels I was on was parents who lost their children to tragedy. It was 8 parents, including me.
Yeah.
And we all told our story. And it just flourished from there. People have me to come out, tell my testimony, and tell, how do I get through grief? How do I deal with grief? And so then I had a pastor to reach out to me. She's an author, and to do a collaboration with 20 other women. And the book is called Destined to Win, Volume 2. And it's 20 women telling their testimonies and their story. And we each have a chapter. And my chapter is called Grief to Greater. And I just wrote about my experience. I just wrote about, I wanted to write about something else dealing with grief, stuff that people don't talk about,
Yeah.
how family dynamic can change through grief. I wrote about that in that chapter, how, it's just something about grief that can either split a family or bring them together. Grief does so much. Everybody can't handle grief. What you need when you're going through grief, the people you need around you, keep your atmosphere. All of that is in my chapter.
Yeah, that's
because
good.
that's what got me going. And I talk about my music, like how music was my place, was my refuge. I would play music because Terrence, it was always loud in the house. He always had music playing. He always had a laptop rigged up with something that was like his studio or room,
Yeah.
And we always had music and was always singing late at night. I would bang on the wall like, "Terrence, I got to go to work tomorrow." But he couldn't help it because I played music when I was pregnant. And, his whole childhood was music. And so that's always been my place of anchor and refuge and safety. Even when my family was, it was too much for them.
Yeah.
So I had to get it,
Yeah.
And I remember feeling like, man, I'm handling this, but it's very hard for them because we had to go through a court trial and never been in a criminal court. I've been in traffic court
Plenty of times.
but when you go in a criminal court, it's all of the steps of that is very overwhelming.
Yes.
You're in a courtroom where people that do big crimes.
Yeah.
You're up on the high floor.
Yeah.
Never been up there. All of that was very traumatic for me. The news wanting to talk to you again
Constantly,
and again.
yes.
They came to the court trial. They wanted, and they really, really, really kept calling saying, well, he's a young African-American male. And he's apparently this great guy.
Yes.
And we get a lot of slack. I had one news reporter tell me that they get a lot of emails and slack because it's like whenever they're talking about African-American males, it's always bad. So we just want to know more about them. And so they kept wanting to talk.
Wow.
And so they showed up at the courtroom and they was like, do you mind if we're here? And I said, that's fine. And then of course they had asked the judge, can they be in there? And I said, just be integral. They asked, could they come to the funeral? They call and ask, could they be at the funeral? And one of the main reasons I said yes is because the outpour of young people. I've never, I can't begin to tell you. And I was thinking more about that. I'm still thinking about outreach and helping people and loving on people and just what can come out of this, like in everything that I do. Although it's a sad moment, I said, these were my exact words. I said, you can bring the cameras. I said, but what I do not show him lying there. I want you to show all of these young people. I want you to show the outpour of love. That's what I want to be. That's what I want the message to be about when you put this on the news. Not the death and all of that. We know that. That's the obvious. And I want it to be integral. So please don't put that on the news.
Yeah.
But I want you to show how the kids from the college made a big choir and, you know, and the pallbearers was his friends and all of those things like that. I still... And one of the things that I talk about with grief is not being selfish, because if you have a loved one that is known by so many people and loved by so many people, sometimes grief can make us just want to be but we can't do that.
He impacted too many people.
We can't do that.
Yeah.
You have people coming up to you saying, oh, he was nice to me when I went to the bank, and he was, you know, so I couldn't possibly be selfish.
Yeah.
So I was so overwhelmed and fascinated by stories that people would tell me. His friends from college, you know, Terrence loved to go to Bojangles. You know, he gonna be late to class going to Bojangles. And I'm like, Terrence, and you know who told me that story?
Who that?
TJ, who is a pastor in Rocky Mount.
TJ Walker.
TJ Walker was his friend. And then TJ came one year. It was right after the holidays.
Yeah.
And he said, Miss Facing, you still got your Christmas tree up. And it was probably January or February. And I said, I know, babe. He helped me take all my lights down.
Yeah.
And I never knew what TJ stood for. Yeah. Okay?
Yeah.
Had no idea who he was. I knew he was from Rocky Mount. Yeah. I knew he went to church and his dad and was preaching.
Yeah.
Had no idea.
Wow.
Until after my son was gone.
Wow.
I just knew T.J. Walker.
Yeah.
Didn't know it was Thomas L. Walker's grandson.
Right. So how did you find that out?
He was getting married.
Okay. And you got to know his real name.
He was getting married, and he's getting married at Thomas L. Walker's church. And I'm like, oh, that's Thomas L. Walker's church. Yeah, that's my grandfather.
Yeah.
I've been to that man's church many times.
Yes.
Just a connection.
And there's so many people like that. Like, we talk about it a lot. Like, I think Tank called me and I was wrecked. But it's like he had a relationship with all of us.
Yeah. All of y'all.
It's
Tank
crazy.
And
yes.
you and Jamario
yes.
that plays for
Bruno
Mars.
Yep. That's our people.
Thomas.
Yes.
That's
Samo now.
Samo and all of these guys, like his friends.
Yes.
And what's his name?
Greg.
Yes. Just his friends. And I kid you not. When I look at them and when I look at you, I just get so full. Because y'all have gestures alike.
Yeah.
The same kind of things drain y'all.
Yes.
And all I can think about is him.
Yeah.
It's my baby.
Yeah.
And we both have had conversations.
Yeah.
Samo and Greg, and
Yeah.
we've had conversations, and it's just like, I mean, since the death of Terrence, I remember Samo telling me, he said, Miss Reka, I wanted to come. He said, but I didn't have a car. Wow. And now I look at his life now.
Yeah.
You know, it's you just never know.
Yeah.
You just never know. And he was so special. And when he was born, you know, when a baby is born, right after the baby is born, they always check the reflexes on a baby. You know, when they get them out, they before they clean them off, or after they clean them off, they check and they rate babies.
Yeah.
And they're usually like an 8 or 9 or 7. And I remember after having Terrence, it was a lot of whisper going on, like something going on. And the doctor came over and said, you know, he's a 10. Wow. We hardly ever get 10s. He's a 10. And I said, what does that mean? My mom might have asked. And he said his IQ is going to be very high. And Terrence was very smart. Wow. Academically, he was very, very smart. And when he started elementary school, he was diagnosed with asthma. Wow. Really, really bad. And I was like, he's never going to get out of kindergarten because he's always in the hospital. But he was so smart. Yeah. He was the smartest kid. Like, he was very smart and very funny.
Yes. Hilarious.
And that never left.
Yeah. Hilarious.
That never left.
Yeah.